let's talk about the menstrual cycle. We say the menstrual cycle begins with menstruation, and then ovulation, and then we get back at the end of the cycle to another menstruation. So that's the whole cycle. We've got two phases in the cycle: follicular phase, the luteal phase. First half is the follicular phase, second half is the luteal phase. So I want to talk about generally what the world says should happen in the menstrual cycle, and then talk about ways that I've tracked it, ways I wish I would have been tracking it when I was younger, differences I've noticed, what to do with that information, and like telling more anecdotal stories about myself. So in menstruation, when menstruation begins, so this is called also like the bleed. Menstruation specifically is when you are menstruating. It's when you've got to deal with the mess that is happening if you're not on some kind of birth control or hormone treatment or going through whatever you're going through that stops that from happening. So this is called the bleed, and in this time we have very low estrogen and very low progesterone. And then as we go through this first half of the menstrual cycle, which is called the follicular phase, we are releasing follicular stimulating hormone, which stimulates the follicles of the ovary. Ovaries hold follicles which each produce eggs. So the hypothalamus produces FSH, which stimulates the follicle to begin producing an egg. So that's what's happening from menstruation to ovulation is FSH is stimulating the follicle to release an egg at ovulation. And so what's happening also with the FSH is our estrogen is going up. So at ovulation, our estrogen peaks, the pituitary gland begins to release luteinizing hormone beginning the luteal phase, and in the luteal phase, the follicle, which released the egg at ovulation, becomes a corpus luteum and begins to release estrogen and progesterone, which are going to start going up. Then, at the end of the luteal phase, estrogen and progesterone are really high. The egg will come out of the fallopian tube and will, if it's been fertilized, will implant, and these hormones will stay high. If it's not fertilized, it won't implant, and progesterone will drop, which is usually kind of like a PMSy thing. And then we start the cycle over again. So you're either pregnant and you go be pregnant, or you're not pregnant and you have another menstruation, another bleed. So, okay, so the other thing to talk about is ovulation. Ovulation is when the egg is released. We switch from follicular phase to luteal phase, I believe, because the follicle is now done doing egg stuff and it's going to switch into doing I don't have an egg anymore kind of stuff. So ovulation is like the end of, generally speaking, from what I could find, the experience of ovulation, because it takes like a little while, I think, for everything to move around, and sperm can live for a little while in the woman's body, and so the libido kind of starts to kick up 5-ish days before ovulation, and you're going to get like symptoms of that in here as well. Okay, so that's just like a key. And then usually down here, nearish the end of the luteal phase, we have PMS, which is premenstrual symptom, because we have menstruation here. Pre-menstruation, we get moody. Why? Well, our hormones suddenly frickin' spike. Okay, so for the follicular stimulating hormone, we've got some in the body, and then it kind of peaks, and then we're just growing the follicle, and then there's a surge to release the egg, and then there's nothing, and then, oh, there's not going to be a baby, so let's start growing that follicle again. Okay? Luteinizing hormone, which starts ovulation, suddenly peaks, and then goes away. Progesterone drops in PMS and as part of the early part of the cycle in the follicular phase. And then the expired follicle produces a lot and it drops once the body realizes that the egg is not fertilized, and it does implant, and we begin the menstrual cycle again. And then estrogen is also low at the beginning of menstruation, and it stays low until we begin to build in the follicular phase, and then we kind of drop off again in ovulation until the corpus luteum also builds some estrogen, and then it drops off again when we begin the cycle once more. So, just looking at this, having a little bit of information about the order of things. First, we're bleeding, then we have a little bit of time, and then our libido will start to build. We'll start to get some ovulation symptoms, which might be like sticky discharge, higher libido, feeling chatty, feeling pretty, feeling attractive, being more social, things that are like driving the chances of fertilization. And then that will end because these hormones will just kind of drop off, and we'll switch into a different like type of like how we feel in our bodies, because we've got different hormones flowing around. And then things will really start to spike, and then that will drop off right in time for another cycle to begin. So just knowing that without having like the dates of like when should things happen, or knowing about like when should you be like high energy and when should you be like trying to be cozy, just seeing this flow, does that spark any insight into your own cycle or the cycles of those around you, if you're aware of them? And that's why you're watching this video, to like find out what's going on, other than just asking them if that's what's happening. So I'm going to talk about what the website says should be happening in each phase, and like when's high energy and the body temperature and what is normal and the normal timeline. But just knowing that this is what is like should be happening and this is the flow of hormones, how does that inform your own experience, right? And how does that give you any like self-compassion that the fluctuations you're going through in the month are like chemically, hormonically driven? It's not you being unstable or like when am I going to get on top of this? When you learn to ride these waves and work with them, right? Which is what tracking your cycle, other than being prepared for it, like, are we only being prepared for the bleed, or are we also being prepared for the changes in our physical needs, our emotional needs, like our energetic needs throughout the cycle, right? Okay. So, what the websites are saying is that this time, the follicular phase, we have higher body temp, and we can tolerate like pain and endurance and like use more strength, and we're strong here. And so if you had a time to like begin or like set intentions or like start a workout plan or like a new diet regime, or whatever, you have a goal and you're like, when should I start? You should start as soon as you are comfortable after or during menstruation. Like, go ahead and have your period, okay? That's a sacred time. But like once you're over that and you feel like you can get up again, allegedly, this is the time when your body's in like go, go, go mode. If you're trying to build muscle and like work out really heavy, this is the time to do it. This is when your body's going to rebuild better. So this is strength and like high intensity type training, because we can rebuild better. We like grab protein better, allegedly, right? And then we have this ovulation phase where we're making the switch into the luteal phase, which is a lower body temp. So now we're colder. It's like We have a lower tolerance. We are not as ready to like just go outside and go for a run. No, it's too uncomfortable now, or it's too cold. The office is suddenly cold. We want our comfort foods. This is more of like a yoga, walking, like hot bath type of how are you spending time in your body phase. Um, and so this is the week if you have to work really hard at something, you work hard at it for like 2-ish weeks, and then you take 2-ish weeks to just refine some points and let your body like chew on it without holding yourself to that high standard. Yeah. That is the flip between follicular phase and luteal phase, and that is allegedly the flow of things. So you might realize when you are menstruating and for a few days after that, like you can't sleep with all your blankets, it's too hot. You're a little bit more active outside of the pain and the symptoms. So like once the symptoms are over, you might like kind of pop up and be like, look at this mess, or like whatever. And personal best days, if you're looking for a personal best, it's going to be right around this estrogen peak, like here in ovulation, when all of this is building and you're feeling strong, you're feeling confident, and that especially within the ovulation phase, when the libido is high and the hormones are high that are making us feel like attractive and, social and confident. And then we switch into the luteal phase, which is suddenly the comfort food switches on. We're colder, we don't want to move as intensely, we want to move slower, we want to take our time, we need more rest. And like there's studies coming out that like legitimately you need hours more rest. And then near the end of the luteal phase is where our hormones start spiking again and going all over the place. So this can be like really commonly a volatile time to experience, called premenstrual symptom. So the normal dates for the cycle are, I believe, 22. I don't remember the upper end. Like maybe 29 days, with like 28 being everyone thinking that like periods are aligned to the moon exactly, and that is not true. You may have a regular period that follows these peaks, and you can see them clearly in your life and in your tracking, but you just have a shorter, one of your cycles are shorter, or both of them are shorter. So it can be helpful to know how long your cycles are, because then you can start to kind of like, okay, I've got 1 week until then, right? So you've got menstruation, and then when is ovulation? Allegedly 14 days later. And then when is the end? Allegedly another 2 weeks or 14 days later. Personally, like I do have a 2-week follicular phase. This is pretty exact. And then I have a 7 to 9 day luteal phase. So this, flow of hormones and this change from ovulation and however high up, energetic, sociable, like approachable that you are or you feel, to the switch into like, well, no, I don't really want to go out, like I want to stay in, and like be cozy and bake a cake or whatever, to the nesting period of having those high hormones where you kind of like get ready for whatever's coming, whether it be pregnancy or a period, and then that drop in hormones, as the period is imminent. That, instead of happening over 2 weeks, is happening in the space of one for me. So it's very condensed. And then people with shorter cycles are having, cycles more often. So they're going through this more often. Whereas someone who has a longer cycle maybe has to deal with these drawn out phases, in a way that is like not really sustainable. So there's lots of variation, and it's normal to have variation. You're not broken if you don't follow the 28 day. You're not broken if you don't follow this. Women's medical science is very limited, and if you have any variation, you get like discluded from the studies to begin with, and so thus special cases like are not in the data as far as I am aware.